So the thing that I want to focus on here is what I call fascism at home and treason abroad. But mostly I want to focus in on Kash Patel, Trump's appointment
Nominee.
for the head of the FBI, nominee. Thank you, for the head of the FBI. Let's look at the New York Times headline. Kash Patel has a plan to remake the FBI into a tool of Trump. President-elect Donald Trump's pick to lead the FBI has called for firing the agency's top officials, shutting down its Washington headquarters, and prosecuting journalists. And he has an enemies list. But look, why don't we let Kash Patel speak for himself about that?
As someday it may happen that a victim must be found, I've got a little list of society offenders who might well be underground and who never would be missed. They never would be missed.
Well, of course, that wasn't actually Kash Patel. That was that was the Mikado from Gilbert and Sullivan, or Rogers and Hammerstein, excuse me. But Kash Patel does have a little list. Actually, Kash Patel has a long list.
We're going to read it to you, right, John? We're going to read it out loud.
We are going to read it. It's a little long and it's a little horrifying, but I think it's important to really actually see who these people are. These are people. Right? These are individuals. It's not just an abstract list. Let's look at the people that he has explicitly said in writing or in speaking that he would investigate if he were the head of the FBI. Michael Atkinson, Lloyd Austin, used to be the defense secretary, Brian Auten, supervisory intelligence analyst, James Baker, Bill Barr, John Bolton, Stephen Boyd, Joe Biden, John Brennan, John Carlin, Eric Ciarmella,
Pat Cipollone, James Clapper, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Elizabeth Dibble, Mark Esper, Alyssa Farah, Evelyn Farkas, Sarah Isker Flores. She's on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Merrick Garland, Stephanie Grisham, Kamala Harris, Gina Haspel,
Fiona Hill, Curtis Hyde, Eric Holder, Robert Hur, Cassidy Hutchinson, Nina Jankowicz, Lois Lerner, Loretta Lynch, Charles Kupperman, General Kenneth McKenzie, Andrew McCabe, Ryan McCarthy,
Mary McCord, Dennis McDonough, General Mark Milley, over my dead body, Elisa Monaco, Sally Meyer, Robert Mueller, Bruce Orr, Nellie Orr, Lisa Page, Pat Philbin, John Podesta,
Samantha Power, Bill Priestap, Susan Rice, Rod Rosenstein, Peter Strohs, Jake Sullivan, Michael Sussman, Miles Taylor, Timothy Thibault,
Andrew Weissman, Alexander Vindman, Christopher Wray, Sally Yates.
Now, of course, one of the things that you'll notice about this list is a lot of these people are former Trump administration officials. But this is what happens with radical fascistic movements. Okay, whether it's the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, whatever kind of revolution that shakes up society and puts all the power in a strong man's hands. The original wave of revolutionaries aren't revolutionary enough. They're not. They still have some allegiance, right, to some values or some institutions or some morality that makes them not 100% pliable in the dictator's hands. So Bill Barr, who actually, of course, carried immense water for Trump, it wasn't enough, right? He still wanted him to agree that the election was stolen and let the Justice Department investigate it.
Now, John, listen, I think this list is dangerous and hateful and anti-institutional and radical and fascist and all that. But I'm going to say something about it. Talk is cheap. All of his people are saying crazy stuff like this. And I'd like to see him get the Justice Department to move on any of these people. Good luck. Now, and the fact that he's saying it has put his nomination in doubt, actually. This is crazy. And it's also just, it's hot air. I don't get it.
Well, I take it a little more seriously than you do, and I'm a little more intimidated by it, frankly, than you are. And by the way, that's not all, right? Not only is he going to prosecute all of these politicians, but now how much would you pay? That's not all. He's also including journalists.
We got the bench for it, Bannon, and you know those guys. I'm not going to go out there and say their names right now so the radical left-wing media can terrorize them. But, excuse me, the one thing we learned in the Trump administration the first go-around is we got to put in all America patriots top to bottom. And we got them for law enforcement. We got them for intel collection. We got them for offensive operations. We got them for DOD, CIA, everywhere. And the one thing we will do that they never will do is we will follow the facts and the law and go to courts of law and correct these justices and lawyers who have been prosecuting these cases based on politics and actually issuing them as lawfare. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice. And Steve, this is why they hate us. This is why we're tyrannical. This is why we're dictators.
Yeah, actually, this is why we hate you, and this is why you're tyrannical, and this is why you're dictators.
I was talking to Steve Bannon, who's insane, and this guy is insane. You really think the Senate's is gonna approve this nomination? We'll see. I mean, if he does, it's terrible, and I'll be alarmed. Yeah. But I think he's insane, and there is no way that all of the judges in all of the states and all the jurisdictions are going to look at this stuff. Look at that fairly experienced prosecutor from Connecticut who Bill Barr put on Durham to investigate the investigators. He got nothing. And the courts wouldn't even pay attention to him, destroyed his reputation, which, of course, anyone who works with Trump, their reputation gets destroyed. So listen, I don't want the audience to think that, John, you're the alarmist and I'm just reassuring everybody. The fact that anyone would say these things, I find incredibly alarming and offensive. And if this does come to pass, I'm not sticking around in this country if that's what happens to our institutions. But we are not there yet. I want to see the Senate with a 3-vote advantage nominate this guy. I just don't think it's going to happen. He's too crazy. And what happens with Trump is he nominates these crazy people without background checks. Then they get turned down. And then he comes up with someone that will still do his dirty work, but is less controversial, like Pam Bondi instead of Matt Gaetz. They're talking about Ron DeSantis for DOD rather than Pete Hegseth, who's a rapist, an alcoholic, and a criminal.
You at least have to have face validity. It's okay to be corrupt, but you can't have two heads.
Unless you're Trump.
Yeah, and these people really are anti-experts. But Harry, you're saying that's such a great term that I read in the New Republic. Anti-experts. They're really.
Yeah.
But Harry, it's more than just hot air. It's more than just threats. Let's look at a letter that Kash Patel's lawyer sent to a journalist, Olivia Troy. Olivia Troy wrote, "Today, Kash Patel sent a letter to my counsel threatening legal action and demanding that I retract my comments on MSNBC about his unfitness to serve as FBI director. This aligns with his threats against the media and political opponents revealing how he might conduct himself if confirmed in the role. I stand by my statements. My priority remains the safety and security of the American people. I am not the only one who has expressed concern about him, so why me? And so it begins.
Yeah.
I want to tell you something, Gary. I don't just find this scary, okay? I'm scared. I'm personally scared, okay? Because I don't want to get a letter like that from Kash Patel, okay? Because I don't know what Olivia Troy's circumstances are. She may be very wealthy. I don't know. But it's still obviously a horrible thing to have to defend yourself. But I can't afford it.
I would send a letter. I would send a letter back saying, "Fuck you."
Well,
no, wait a minute. There is nothing that idiot can do because someone on embassy said something that he didn't like. No court will look at it. There is a First Amendment protection of being able to criticize people in the public eye. And that is nonsense. This is the kind of crap that Trump did to people his whole life. He sued, Bill Maher for comparing him to an orangutan, which is actually pretty convincing when you see the pictures side by side. I think this actually hurts him. I think the fact that she published this, tweeted it, is fantastic.
But my point is Bill Maher still had to go to court. Okay. And yes, he won the suit. And yes, it was thrown out. And yes, it was basically a harassment. The suit was harassment. But when they start coming down the food chain, okay, and I'm just using myself as an example, okay, if they did file a harassment suit and I had to hire a lawyer to defend myself, I can't afford it. That's what I'm saying. So I am intimidated. I'm just trying to say I'm personally.
You would countersue for the price of the lawyer and for the defamation and the injury to you, and it would go on for quite a while until he lost. No one's going to win lawsuits against journalists or people like you, John. They're just not going to, unless the whole system completely collapses. No. If all the judges start to put people in jail for saying bad things about Trump, it's over. Then our political system has collapsed. And I'm not saying it won't happen, but it's not happening yet. If anything, this was a dumbass move on his part. That alone might sink his nomination that he sent for that letter.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, listen, I have a suggestion. I know you're not going to like it at first, okay?
I usually go along with what you want.
I just want you to give it a hearing. Would it really kill us to go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss his fat, fleshy ass and say, look, the last 31 shows, we were just kidding. Just kidding.
He
does it all the time.
We, like Joe and Mika, we could just do it for background.
Exactly, like Joe and Mika. We're not better than Joe and Mika.
At this point, we really are, actually. So disappointed in them. It was such cowardice. But that's another story.
All right. Well, just give it some thought. So that's the fascism at home, right? This intimidation, this intimidation of the press and the enemies. Mm-hmm. But what's even more frightening is the treason that is implied in this selection and in all of his other selections in the intelligence space. Oh, what we are seeing is a unilateral surrender to Russia. I don't know if we've ever seen anything like this before, that the most powerful country in the world would just, of its own volition, surrender to their mortal enemy, invite people to run the intelligence services, which has been totally dedicated to defending us against Russia, and just hand the keys over to Russia for all of our intelligence. Just open the kimono and just let them in an abject surrender. We found a clip from Russian TV. We're muting it because it's in Russian, so none of us can really, it's just confusing to listen to. But there are subtitles. And so what we're going to do, Harry, is I'm going to show that clip, but I'm going to read the subtitles. There's a commentator there. And at some point, I'm going to switch because Kash Patel is being interviewed. I'll try to make it clear when Kash is speaking and when the Russian announcer is speaking. Mm-hmm. What an excellent team is coming along with Trump, says the announcer. If they are allowed to get in, they will just quickly dismantle America brick by brick. They're so great. Trump's nominee to head the FBI, Kash Patel, is simply on fire. The FBI's this is Kash Patel speaking. The FBI's footprint has gotten too big, and the biggest problem the FBI has comes out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopen it the next day as a museum of the deep state. I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Same thing with the DOJ. What are all these people doing here? So while you're bringing in the right people, you also have to shrink government. He's a beaut, says the announcer. He's very, very good. Kash Patel, right? They're planning to appoint this guy the FBI director. Personally, I'm fully in support of him. Replacing Christopher Wray. Another one like him will be the head of the Defense Department. Another one like him will be the head of the Defense Department. So there you go. They couldn't be happier. Our mortal enemies, Russia, couldn't be happier.
John, those are Russian journalists. I mean, aren't they just speaking for themselves?
That's right, because they have independence in Russia, right?
Oh, by the way, that is so crazy what he said, shutting down the building and turning into a museum to the deep state. That alone will disqualify him in hearings. He's going to have to disavow all this stuff, and it's insane. It's not going to happen. It's not going to fly. It's not. Mm-hmm. Watch it. But the next person that's nominated is going to look better. He's going to look better. He's going to look better.
But look at what's behind the mission that's being expressed. Okay, that could be done in a less crazy or extreme way, which is they don't want the FBI to be in the counter espionage business anymore. Right? We shouldn't even have an intel unit trying to protect us from Russia. Just go catch the bank robbers. Don't even be in Washington, D.C. Just spread out across the country catching robbers.
John, I totally agree with you. But listen, once you have an America first isolationist policy, then it doesn't matter what you do in the world. And then if you're Trump, you can, love your dictators and build a tower in Moscow and all the things that he's been waiting for. So that's how it works. You see, because Americans...
This is worse than an American first. This is much worse than America first. This is an alliance with Putin.
No. It's America first allows this to happen. It's what allows it to happen.
But there's been isolationism in the past that wasn't treasonous. Agreed. This is treason, and that can destroy a country. And it's not just Kash, right? We've talked about Tulsi Gabbard, but let's review Tulsi Gabbard again. How Tulsi Gabbard became a favorite of Russia's state media. President-elect Donald J. Trump, picked to be the director of national intelligence, has raised alarms among national security officials. Nominating Gabbard for director of national intelligence is the way to Putin's heart. And it tells the world that America under Trump will be the Kremlin's ally rather than an adversary. Ruth Ben-Gayat, a professor of history at New York University and the author of Strongmen, a 2020 book about authoritarian leaders, wrote on Friday. And so we would have a national security official who would potentially compromise our national security. And this is actually from another article, but I wanted you to read this. Representative Adam Kinzinger tweeted that Gabbard was spreading, quote, actual Russian propaganda and accused her of being traitorous. Others also accused Gabbard of appearing to be working on behalf of Russia by helping them spread conspiracy theories about U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. And Hillary Clinton, by the way, also called her a Russian asset.
Right. And also what I've also been hearing is that intelligence people in our allies are preparing not to share any intel with us because she's compromised. She's a Russian asset. And I think this is going to make her nomination also quite difficult, although they're not going to reject all of them.
That's the thing. You see, what he's doing that's actually sort of evil and evilly clever, right, is he's doing what he usually does. He's flooding the zone with shit, right? Yeah. Only here he's flooding the zone with shitty people, right? So we can't stop them all.
Well, you know what they did in the 1940s in Hollywood was there was a Hays Commission that was censoring movies. So what producers would do is they'd include a couple of really racy scenes. And then the Hays censors would cut those out, which they didn't want to be in the movie anyway. So the rest of the movie wouldn't be censored. That's what Trump does. That's flooding the zone. He's putting out people who can be rejected if they're rejected. Of course, the other issue for Trump is he'd like them all to be taken. And you and I know that he is feeling wounded and rageful that he's not getting Matt Gaetz. And I don't think Pete Hegseth is going anywhere either.
I agree. All right, the last person I just want to point out, some of you may, I never know how to pronounce his name, Boris Epstein. How do you spell
Epstein.
Epstein. Boris Epstein
Yeah.
is now going to be the head of counterterrorism. Of course, counterintelligence, but of course, he's Russian. First of all, he's born in Russia. Okay. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's not a loyal American, but let's learn a little more about him. In September 2016, the media watchdog organization Media Matters for America criticized CNN, Fox News, and PBS for failing to disclose Epstein's financial ties to the former Soviet Union, which include consulting through Strategy International LLC for entities doing business in Eastern Europe and moderating a Russian-sponsored conference on investment opportunities in Moscow. So the whole team is Russian, right? They're all Russian. I mean, also, when you have a name like Boris, it sounds like Boris and Natasha. So, I mean, that automatically tips you off.
Well, but it's like Paul Manafort. This was the same thing we saw in
just like Paul Manafort. Exactly.
But
these people will be in charge of our intelligence. Christopher Wray was corrupt. I've been saying this for years. Okay. He used they say you shouldn't use the Justice Department as a sword or a shield, right? He used it as a shield. You notice not a single Republican has been indicted for treason with Russia, even though it's become a mass movement. So why is that? Because Christopher Wray has been protecting them. Christopher Wray delayed the raid on Mar-a-Lago by over a month because he was dragging his feet and didn't want to do it. So he's been a loyal, they want to Kash Patel wants to investigate him now, but he's actually been a loyal conspirator. But as you've pointed out, he's an institutionalist, and he probably wouldn't go the extra step of making the FBI a sword. He is not going to open investigations into Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Bill Barr.
Nobody else is either.
Right. And so that's not good enough. So even Harry, even if he does get rid of these people, the point is the treason is in plain sight. He's going to give Russia all of our intelligence. And here's one other thing to keep your eye on in terms of the treason factor. Why Trump's post-election phone calls with foreign leaders matter. The problem isn't that Trump is talking to foreign leaders. The problem is that he's having private chats without coordinating with the State Department. What's not normal is Trump's insistence on working outside his own country's system and diplomatic framework. What's more, the Republicans' refusal to coordinate with the State Department, deliberately leaving the U.S. officials in the dark, raises related questions about why exactly Trump wants these unsecured conversations to be kept secret. So in other words, America used to have a foreign policy that was American and involved the whole State Department, and it represented the American position. Now our foreign policy is just whatever the hell Trump says on the phone at the moment, whatever he gives away, whatever corrupt deal he cuts, whatever demented thing he does or says, and he doesn't have to tell us or the State Department what he said, what he agreed to. So we won't have an American foreign policy anymore. We'll have a Trump foreign policy based on corruption and demented insanity.
Yeah, that's what would happen the first time too. Except there were some guardrails for the first 3 years, and then they were gone. And Actually, John, can we transition to our focus on Trump for a minute, or is there something more you want to add?
I've got one last.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay, so this is really crazy. Okay, this is an actual tweet from our Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance. So for those of you who are just listening, this is a takeoff on a Norman Rockwell painting, the one where they serve the Thanksgiving turkey, and Trump is there as the father. And J.D. Vance has superimposed his own face on the mother's body. So he's there wearing like an apron and a dress, which is really odd. And on the platter is the United States of America. Now, what it has is an electoral map. So it's showing you all the red states and all the blue areas. And so I suppose what he's trying to say is that, hey, we're giving thanks for winning the election, or congratulations, America, here's the election. But think about this. I don't know if you remember the old Twilight Zone where these aliens showed up and they had this book, To Serve Man. And they thought, well, these aliens must really have good intentions because they have a whole book about how to serve man. But then it turns out it's actually a cookbook. So they're not going to serve man, they're going to serve man. And in that picture, right, everything's overdetermined, right? And we know as psychologists, like, people reveal things in their images and their metaphors. He's literally serving America on a platter to be cut up and devoured. That's where we are.
Yes. It's a very odd choice, isn't it, though?
It's also really strange.
It's a Norman Rockwell painting, I think, that he's put Trump right behind him and himself in a dress.
Yeah.
I just think, and he's against trans people. I'm
just going to say, I mean, and he wears eyeliner. I mean, something really, this is sort of like a Jewish anti-Semite here.
And there's this way in which it looks like Trump is right behind him, and I'll leave it to you. He just
wants to be Trump's little bitch, and maybe that's what a vice president is supposed to be with Trump, I suppose.
Ask Mike Pence. I mean, if there's anybody who leaned over and submitted, it was Mike, until one time he didn't. For which I will always be grateful, by the way, even though I think he's kind of a horrible person. But it was a great thing. It took real courage. And you know who we have to thank for it in part? Dan Quayle. He called Dan Quayle, who was not only vice president, but was also from Indiana. They were from the same state. And Quayle said, you can't do that. Fantastic.